This is where I started my EAP life, so very cool to be here. So thanks for coming along. So today I'm going to give you some context because I am in Hong Kong, so just to give you a sense of what that is. And then what I want to move on to is the approach that we took in the language center there with generative AI, and really it ends up being a talk about assessment more than anything, but a little bit about some of the positive uses of AI that we have been able to think of at this point. But very much the title of the talk is Living Laboratory, and it is still very much a living laboratory. So I need to acknowledge all the colleagues in my center, and especially the 43 course leaders whose work is being referenced here in this talk. So my context is an EMI university in Hong Kong, as are all of the universities. It's a specialist institution, though, with science, engineering, and business schools, and then another school that does all else. So that's where mostly we do our language support in those 3 discipline areas. It's a large center because we are responsible for teaching 4 credit-bearing English courses and a Chinese course. So to give a sense of this, of the definition of large, we taught 7,888 students this past spring, and we did that with 88 full-time instructors. So we had 43 language courses this spring, which is typical. We do English and Chinese for special and/or academic purposes. It kind of can be quite a few different things. And then we also do what I'm calling proficiency courses for what we call third languages, Spanish, Japanese, French. It is from beginner and that sort of thing. But then we do, I'm calling entry-level English and Chinese as well. So on the English side, which is what you are interested in, we have a 6.5 IELTS entry score, so they all have 6.5. We don't do exceptional, but it's the ones who kind of didn't come in the strongest. So that's what I'm calling in the context of this. So the generative AI context. So it was January that it all hit the scene for us, and we became very aware that this thing exists. ChatGPT, but we really are talking about generative AI, and we're not referring so much to ChatGPT because there's so many tools available, as we've seen today, and so we tend to not focus on that one. And also, we had a big discussion about promoting one company, which didn't seem right, so we tried to avoid eating the two for those reasons. Also, ChatGPT was not readily available in Hong Kong. However, very, very, very easy to get. But because we also immediately had concerns about access and making sure that students had the same access, our university quite quickly subscribed and made available ChatGPT for students, which starts to tell you about our context. So going back to January, though, when we were first trying to figure out what it was, before our semester started, we had a great CPD talk that just introduced it to us, showed us how it worked, made us all go, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Very, very useful because we could see it straight on, and very pleasingly, the majority response was how exciting, which is really, really great, right? Because if it's fear, then that's really, you have to overcome that before you do anything else. I think part of the reason for that is because of the nature of our university. I mentioned science, engineering, and immediately the view in our university was embrace it, embrace it. There's another Hong Kong university who I won't name, who immediately said, it was leaked to the press that they were going to ban it. And those other ones of us that are more science inclined, feeling competitive, said, ha, 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 ha. And anyway, I think in Hong Kong now, everyone's on board with it. We have to embrace it. But our university was very, very early to say that kind of thing, really largely because of what they do. We have some people who do AI, and they're really big on the face recognition and face and vision and all that kind of thing. So it's just really not possible in our institution. So since that's where we're situated, we weren't surprised. So our view, if I could try to characterize, because we're a very large center, I would say that we were cautiously open to the challenge. I'm not saying everyone was, leaping at the chance, because it's scary, and there's some, kind of all of us really have elements of that. But also, I think very quickly we all sort of agreed we can't prevent it. So if you can't prevent it, because in fact our university gave us the options, saying they really wanted everyone to embrace it. They said, since it's so new, you can choose as the responsibility for a course, you can choose what you want to do. So, but we thought we needed to act as a center, and we went with embrace. So this semester, we very much decided to characterize as a transition semester and thought, let's just call it that. Let's treat it like this. It's transition for everybody, including the students. So that's the approach that we took from the very beginning. And then the idea was, and then in the summer, we've got work to do. So why am I here, you might ask? We have work to do to be ready for the next academic year. And the idea is that we're moving towards trying to embrace, which I am going to define as maximizing, but we'll get to that at the very end. So I think that the approach from my point of view this semester is that we really need to be all on the same page because we're so large, so many courses, so many students. And of course, because we do what most EAP does, we teach in small sections. So our very largest course is more than 40 people teaching in it. So we really need to be on the same page. That was my priority this. But it is the great unknown, and we don't know. So what are we going to do and how are we going to do this? So the approach we took was to step right back and to say, look, let's just strip it right down to two really fundamental things. Let's strip it down to pedagogical principles, and let's strip it down to an ethical commitment to fairness. And if in doubt, let's step back and say, okay, with these two things in mind, what's the right thing to do? Because how else can we all get on the same page? So this is what we use to underpin our approach this past semester. What does that mean specifically? So February, March, we agreed this statement that we embrace innovation technology work, but we recognize we're in a transition period this semester, so our approach is to rely on principles with an ethical commitment to ensure fairness. Now, what is this? So what we did, we asked every instructor in their sections, in their LMS site, we happen to use Canvas, upload this. Let's make this the official, so that if there's any doubt, for students, for ourselves, we can point to this. And this hopefully will have us making not necessarily exactly the same decision in every section, but at least a decision that we can feel good about and will lead us to the same conclusion. What we also did at the very beginning of the semester, because the semester has started really before we could get our heads around what we were doing and what we could potentially do. So we also said, we had an early meeting and said, look, at this point, you can change some things if you want, you can. We're not as controlled in Hong Kong as some, I don't know every institution here, but we are allowed in our institution to make changes even though the course has begun. But only if it's really clear and obvious what to change, because at this point I could probably look back and say what to change, but 1 month into, 6 weeks into meeting this new technology, it's quite challenging. So we said, please be cautious to all of our course leaders. Only make a change if it's really clear and obvious what you can change. Only make a change that really can be done across the entire course, especially if you're big, but even a smaller course, because everyone needs to be doing the same thing. And only if it's uncontroversially implementable. So what does that mean? It means that if you've already announced to your students you're doing X and they're all on board, that's not uncontroversially implementable. But we were not going to change rubric criteria at this point, and we were not going to change the general approach to assessment because the semester has begun. So this is where living laboratory came in. We just felt like we couldn't do that legitimately unless we knew what we were changing to. So as the semester's continuing, we're having a lot of discussion, a lot of sharing sessions, a lot of questions. And it became clear to us early on that we really need to think about this as two different sorts of things going on. And when we had this recognition as a center, this really helped. So there's the Gen AI side that's a source of information. This morning it was really useful that for Mike to say it's not a database. Agreed, it's not a database, but it can be used as a place for information, right? So which is slightly different from the tool side of it. So early on, when we made this distinction, this helped a little bit, because then the question about citing, not citing. So then we said, okay, this is what we do. You always have to cite, give reference for ideas that came from somewhere else, not in your own head. So let's tell students, or let's tell ourselves, let's treat it like you would Wikipedia. If you found something in Wikipedia, what citation approach would you use? How would you approach Wikipedia? The whole thing. Let's just transfer that. And that seemed to help because we can all kind of understand that for the source side. For the tool side, a lot of discussion. And what we came up with, we decided to implement a declaration of use. So what do I mean, a declaration of use? What I mean is we decided to say that the students need to say whether or not they used it. Just say if they did. Why? 100% the reason was because we don't know. We don't know what's going on. We don't know how they're going to use it. A lot of us still don't know what it does and what they can do. We're still figuring it out ourselves. But if we do this, then we have some options maybe. If we don't do it, we're just kind of, even more. Yeah. So this was our reaction to the Great Amendment. It took us a little while to come up with a declaration of use. This is what we came up with, the English version, because we teach Chinese as well. And it's pretty straightforward and standard. It's not, yeah. So of course, like every university, we have our own academic integrity policies and plagiarism, sort of thing. So, we said, look, we've got that. So again, fairness, pedagogical principles, ethical. So we want everybody to remember, we're here for teaching, we're here for learning, we're here to take responsibility for yourselves, for your learning. So we just push that. And then for each assignment, there's no discussion, it's just I use, I did not use. It goes. And then of course, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to, we didn't know either, right? And especially when we first brought it in, we really had no idea. But then the thinking was, we have something to draw to get to that point. So we really didn't know. Our emphasis was open and honest. And really with all of this, it really felt like this work in psychology, that the same bits of the brain that are triggered by fear or triggered by excitement. That's really how it felt. And it felt like a lot of going back and forth between, and but are they going to all cheat? And they're all going to use this, and we're not going to. Yeah. So again, bringing it back, pedagogical principles. Why are we here? This is university. We're all professionals. These are intelligent kids. We're intelligent. Remember that we're curious. Let's bring it back to that. Let's not let that overcome us. And then let's also remember, as educators, we're the ones who provide guidance. So for me, it was really, really important that we, as a staffing, as a faculty body, we really needed to take that higher ground. We trust you, you trust, we're just going to do our best, you're going to do our best. We really push that to help us get through this transition period. So the rationale really was to have an option, so that at the end of the course, we might have something we could draw from. Because again, these are credit-bearing courses, our largest course, more than 40 teachers on it. So we already have quite a standardization process that takes place to make sure that, from section to section. But, with this added complication, quite concerned. But also, I think what I enjoyed about it, when I was on the excitement side instead of the fear side in your brain, was really, it's an opportunity to maximize the situation. And my thinking was, we're not going to get this chance again. Summer comes, then the teaching comes the next academic year. We've kind of had our time in a sense, but it was new to everybody in January and February. So that's really the time when we can try new things. Because if it doesn't work, or if the students also know that we're trying, and if we're being open and honest, we're saying, look, we're in the same boat as you, we're figuring this out. Let's push it as far, because then that will help us make good decisions for next academic year. So with that in mind, students were encouraged to be honest. We were encouraging ourselves to be honest, and to say, look, I don't understand. You probably understand this better than me. I don't know what this is. So let's try to have that in atmosphere. And then when students were faced with this, it was very clear early on that students, not all, but a number of students were thinking, ooh, what are the implications here? If I do declare, and then or if I don't declare, and then I. So we truly tried to push the orientation that if you declare, we know you used it. We haven't said what you can, you can't do, because we haven't got that far. So yeah, so we tried to push them to be more, if in doubt, and you did use something, because then the other question, well, what's Gen AI? Because we were staying away from ChatGPT itself. So just really pushing, and if you don't declare, but then there's a problem later, you don't want to be in that position. It's sort of what we were trying to push students with. So just a little bit beyond assessment, just to let you know what we were doing, we also had a special interest group of just people who were interested, who immediately got onto it, started to do massive amounts of reading so that they could then put out some guidance for us. And so we then regularly started to have some sharing sessions. We have a regular bulletin that comes out with information, and they were putting tips and did you know, and here's another tool, and this is how this works, which is really helpful for everybody else. And also the exploration of all the different available tools, and it's, there's Grammarly, but there's just so many, AI. And I think, I don't know, from my point of view, this is a helpful thing because it really pushes us to face what has been there now for a while and is just growing and growing and growing. So now we really need to do something new. So this part of the talk then, I want to share with you what happens at the end of the semester. So this declaration, in the end, at our exam board, in leading up to our exam board, it transpires that 31 of the 43 courses actually used the declaration they were asked to use. But there are a number of reasons for it. The bulk of the ones who, not the 31, actually did it manually instead of through the LMS because they wanted to incorporate it at the end and then add to it and say, if you used it, how did you use it? And then there are also some courses that managed to ask students to actively use it, and so they wanted to just get more information than just used and used. By the time we got this configured into our LMS, because we did it in a software way, with Canvas itself was programmed to allow us to do that. Added just one more. So by the time we got the declaration up, we were nearly halfway through the semester. So those courses that had early assessments didn't all weren't able to use the declaration for those tasks. So that's some of the reason why some of the few courses didn't. And then our RPG area, they felt quite strongly that at PhD level, the plagiarism mechanism was enough and that they didn't need to be this extra. In terms of the assessment at the instructor level, what we recommended, what we asked everyone to do, is we asked everybody to mark without looking at the declaration first, which is kind of interesting. What I did in my own course, but it was a master's course, and I was co-teaching it. We decided to do a little experiment here. I looked at who said, and then I marked. She didn't, and then she marked. Double blind, and then we compared, which was kind of an interesting exercise. But anyway, we asked people to not, because we're trying to achieve standardization. So we asked people just initially just mark that. We insisted we don't change the rubric criteria themselves at that point in the semester. I mean, it's all tied into that rubric to begin with. And then the idea is that we would then do cross-course analysis and then make decisions. So we've got that data in terms of the nature of the task, and then in terms of the declaration information, we can make some decisions. The one thing we came to throughout as the semester is coming to an end is we came to the realization that even though the rubrics are public, the students know, they get uploaded, everybody, most courses don't actually say what the weightings are. Yeah, we had this realization that it wasn't intentional, it's just how we happened to have done things. We haven't said which part of the group is, so that gave us an opportunity. And as you'll see, we used it. So, use of the information. So what did course leaders do with this information once they got it? At the level of the instructor, just me and my class, me and my students, what we found, what seemed to come out is very, very useful, is it really helped to be a basis for open discussion with the student. So if there was a sense that this, we're not quite sure this is your work, or you're not quite sure you've used it in a way that we've discussed in the class, is okay to use it or not use it, it just opened up that conversation. It then allowed for us to emphasize honesty, for us to remind the students that the whole point is learning and responsibility for learning. And even though we're not a pre-session like most of you in the room, even though we're embedded in it, a lot of what we're doing is helping them to succeed more widely. And so we're in a place to remind them about what university is all about. And also it was useful to use it alongside the Turnitin report. So you probably know that Turnitin has an AI checker, which is, you know, something. So we had three things. We had the Turnitin report, we had the AI checker results, but then this declaration, we could to sit down with the student and say, okay, between these three things, let's talk. What's going on? So just to give you a sense, I chose 3 courses that are about the same size. I couldn't decide of the 43 which ones to show you. And T is just a section. So this is showing you what percentage of the students declared use. And I think what surprised me is some of the lower. Yeah. And also it really varies. But we were hearing that our engineering students were way into it. Yeah, so it did really vary. But what we did find is something I think that Mike said this morning. Most students aren't there to cheat, really, they are there to learn. They go to university for a reason, and a lot of our students said that kind of thing to us. And they were worried, oh, if I do that, that's not why I'm here. So analysis of declaration data, here's a business course. So we had a suite of business courses, and they did an actual analysis between those who said they used it, and then correlation with the marks that they got. And I have 3 of them. Here's a course that has 275 students, low declaration use. Overall, the language criterion was quite a bit, 5% higher. The overall, 4% higher. The overall mark emphasis was 0.93 in the end. Yeah, so not enormous. And then two more business courses. Again, one with 500 and then one quite small, one that had a higher declaration use. Again, not enormous effect on the actual marks, which was a bit of a relief, right? So we had some data, so the declaration use was really useful in confirming there to give us a sense of it. Part of the reason for that is what we did was, we did a lot of making modification where we could to try, again, to ensure fairness. So a number of courses modified the weighting of the criteria. And what's interesting is I'm going through and looking at what people said they did. One course, language accuracy reduced, makes perfect sense. Coherence argumentation increased. Whereas interestingly, another course said coherence reduced. Kind of interesting. But the effectiveness and multimodality, we put more on that. So, I mean, to me, this just illustrates that we, living laboratory, we're trying to figure it out as well. We're not entirely sure. Grammar organization reduced. Ideas clearly related and reinforced rather than just sequenced is what they were looking for. The speaking task moved much more towards that delivery than the content or the words or what was actually being said. And then other kinds of modifications. For some things, we just turned a summative into informative instead of a marker complete, incomplete. And then some tasks could be modified, especially in our beginning in our proficiency courses, to make them in live or live tasks. So then just a couple of slides on the kinds of changes we made that might be useful as you're thinking about what you're doing. There were some added requirements, more marking of the Q&A after a presentation than normally might have been. Some that added notes, photos, or screenshots being part of the assignment, which is, I think, a very useful thing to do. And one of the conclusions I'm coming to is how this allows us to focus on process, which is so important anyway. More focus on demonstration of the specific rhetorical devices that were taught. I guess, Gen AI can do it, but if you're good enough to know what to tell Gen AI to do, you probably learned something, right? And someone added a passage on the motivation for choosing the topic, which is quite personalized, and then reflection on why. These sorts of things that were added that people felt that helped them to decide whether or not what was going on was still legitimate. The sense in our center is that those tasks that were less affected were those that required new ideas, those that relate to a very, very specific context, those that require more creativity, specificity, persuasiveness, style, Well, honestly, how long will these be less affected? I'm not sure, but I think in our transition semester, this is what we seem to find. And I thought this teacher observation was really useful and interesting. I'll let you read this one. So some positive uses of AI in our teaching and learning. There was one class that just completely took it on, and they just pulled it in and they just started. It's just the teacher was excited and actively used it. A reflection helps me understand how students are using it. Again, we're thinking this summer then we can use that as we change our courses. Helpful to generate ideas, and then Grammarly for vocab and grammar. And so some teachers already started to pull it in, right, to use to generate text. So our plans going forward is we are this summer creating a single module in our context-based lesson that we're going to put at the beginning of every course, so that we have some consistency across our center, so that we're not all teaching the same thing of the basics. And then we're trying to redesign tasks this summer. And what we're trying to do more than anything is to require use of it, as opposed to AI proofing. I think our sense is, for how long, what's the point? So we're really seeing what we can do to create assignments that will use it. And so the talk this morning from Mike, very helpful. And then the one helpful thing I'd like to finish by sharing with you is the director of our Center for Education Innovation, who used to be an LC guy and is now in charge of teaching and learning at our university, great guy. He's created this flow chart that looks like this. So it's so small, and you can access it through this link in this QR code, which he has helpfully said he would be happy for me to pass on if it's useful for his former LC comrades. But in this flowchart, what it is he's trying to lay out some steps for some decision making. And I'll put it back up maybe for the questions if you didn't get to see that. But basically, as you can see, it says, are you going to let them use it in your assessment? Yes or no? If yes, then do this. If no, then do that. Just things to think about as you're going through. There are no answers. Yeah, don't get too excited, but it's just to guide you in your thinking. That's the top of it, and this is the bottom of it. And what's at the very bottom is, please consider the following principles once you think you've done the right thing. And so I've just copy pasted the principles because I agree. And to me, the ethics of what's going on here and what we should be doing and how we should be doing it is really crucial, and especially with this unknown world with Gen AI. So I think that's me. Thank you.